Welcome to the Chapter 28 Flipped Classroom, which is about the Islamic empires. And these three empires are shown on the map here. You can see the Ottoman Empire. Oops, we'll see if this one works. Yep, there we go. The Ottoman Empire, the empire of two seas and two lands, the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, and two lands, Europe and Asia. The Safavid Empire, in the middle with its capital at Isfahan, and the Mughal Empire of India. In this PowerPoint, we're going to go over both the similarities and also the differences between these empires. Three Islamic empires, the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals, dominated a huge extent of territory ranging from Eastern Europe and Northern Africa to Western India. In the East during the early modern age. Their control over the Eurasian land and sea trade routes made their influence even greater. They had economic control over this region. All three of these dynasties had their roots in nomadic Turkish-speaking people of Central Asia. That's one of their commonalities. We'll be examining that in the next slide. And although they embraced the new urban and agricultural concepts of settled life, they never forgot their intellectual and social roots among the people of the steppes. This was both beneficial and at times detrimental to their existence. By the 18th century, these empires, for a variety of reasons, had either collapsed completely or were significantly weakened. So first, let's look at commonalities between these empires. Firstly, all of them have origins in the frontier as Turkish or Mongols. These steppe traditions included a strong imperial leader who was kind of like the head of the entire operation. Now, because this leader was Islamic, he was both the political and religious figurehead of the organization. And just like your body without a head, the organization of each of these empires kind of fell apart if the leader unexpectedly was gone and there had to be a battle for succession. They all created elaborate bureaucracies and had huge militaries. And they all used gunpowder or guns, cannons, fire lances to help them dominate these different regions, though they were militarily superior to many of those around them. A lot of the bureaucracy existed previously. In the case of the Ottomans, that would be Rome. In the case of the Safavids, it would be the Persians. All of these empires had multi-ethnic populations, and that meant that although they were called Islamic, there were many different religions within them. And also, they were usually tolerant, although that kind of ebbed and flowed as time went on. So some rulers were more tolerant, some less. All empires were Islamic, and although not all empires had a majority of Muslims that they controlled, all of them used it in some ruling capacity. They all dominated trade, which meant that they were incredibly wealthy, as you can see with many of their buildings, such as their mosques and squares. And they all used their wealth to support public works, cultural projects, especially in cities and especially in capital cities like Istanbul would be a great example of this. Isfahan would be another example of this. Now we're going to move into these empires as individual. The Ottoman Empire lasted from 1289 to 1923. This would be one of those empires that was severely weakened by the 1800s, not gone by the 1800s. The Ottomans developed from a small northwestern Turkish tribe under the control of Osman Bey. Osman Bey was around in the 13th century, or around 1289, and the Ottomans' position on the border between the Islamic and Christian worlds gave them an early sense of mission. They viewed themselves as Ghazni, or Islamic religious warriors. And this religious zeal led them to conquer Anatolia and even further, where Christianity was the dominant religion. But of course, they also conquered Islamic lands as well, like northern Africa. So they weren't entirely concerned with religion. Their passionate desire for conquest and religious expansion was backed by a powerful military machine. This was the Janissaries. Janissaries were children taken from the Devshirme, um, who were basically taken, so they were taken as kids from the Balkans, from Christian households, and raised in the palace to protect the Sultan as Muslim. This force was extremely devoted to the Sultan. And this is one of those interesting places in history because as a Balkan, you might think this is a very negative thing. However, it was a way for families to increase their position among the Devshirme for a child to become a Janissary. So while some families this was kind of their worst nightmare because their children would be becoming Islamic. For others, it was a point of pride to have a Janissary. So this is a different type of slavery than we see in the Americas. The Janissary system was used all the way through the Islamic empires. Janissaries eventually became incredibly powerful. In 1453, Mehmed II's conquest of Constantinople resulted in the establishment of Istanbul. It changed its name. Istanbul, not Constantinople. No, you can't go back. And this laid the groundwork for what was arguably the greatest empire after that of the Romans there. The Ottomans even called themselves the Sultan-i Rum, or the Sultans of Rome, understanding the significance of their great empire. This empire peaked with Suleiman the lawgiver. That is what he's known as in Turkey, even today. That's how he was explained to me. His bust, when I was in Turkey, his bust is actually in the House of Representatives because he built a huge law code. He codified, again, and significantly modified Roman laws, including many laws from his own culture and also making laws for the type of empire that he had, this multifaceted, multi-religious, religiously diverse empire. And Suleiman the Magnificent, however, was a conqueror. The Ottomans expanded all throughout Asia, and they were even on the doorsteps of Vienna at one time. Vienna actually happens a little bit earlier, but Suleiman was able to maintain a very close proximity to Europe. In theory, if things had gone down differently, the Ottomans could have conquered all the way into European territory. That's where we're going to stop this flipped classroom for now, and in a moment we'll get into the Safavids and the Mughals.